Hello everyone, this is Jasmina, and in this video I'm going to talk about, again, your elements in your Bazi. This is number 2B. So this is I'm going to talk about how you deal with elements that are weak in your chart. But again, this is my standard disclaimer. Don't put your name, certainly your name, but your birth date and your time in the comments. Because this opens you up to identity theft. And since I don't do Bazi, it's not going to do you much good. So, and of course, it's good to have your Bazi chart before continuing so you know what you're looking at. Now, what I'm going to address here in this particular video are people who have low levels, below 40%, and specifically those who are very low levels of 0 to 15% in their either in their structures or their profiles in the Joey Yap chart. And again, we're looking at these two things, and they are given from 0 to 100%, so they're very easy to understand. And the profiles do give you more details, but the structures are still an important thing to look at. And the 10 gods is what Joey Yap calls profiles. Most practitioners call these the 10 gods. So I try to use the 10 gods more often because this is what you're going to see in most other people's blogs. Now, again, it is possible to be missing some of the 10 gods, even if all of your structures, which is a combination of the yin and yang version of each of the elements, they could be above 40% and you could still have a missing god because the other element, like if you have very little yin or no yin of the 110 god, maybe you have a lot of the yang version of that 10 god. So, they're both elements. So it's possible. So this is why you need to look at the two separately. So this is how Joey Yap puts out his chart. I don't know why he decides to put the Daymaster in the bottom left corner, but he does. I would put it on the top because that's what everything depends upon. But this will be called companion, and I think this is usually fairly large font on his chart. This will be what your Daymaster element is, and it's as simple as that. Your output, and this is the order in which it goes in. So it's output, wealth, power. Well, he calls it influence, resources, companion. It's always in this order. So this will be your Daymaster element. This will be the element your Daymaster produces. And this is what he calls output. And most practitioners do also. So this is what you produce. That's why it's output. What element you control will be in this position. And this is given the wealth element. This is in agreement with every Bazi thing I've read so forth. It's the element your Daymaster controls, that's your wealth element. Then the next one will be the element that controls your Daymaster. And this is usually given the word power, but Joey Yap calls it influence. Totally fine. It's basically the same thing. So that's what element will be listed here. And the element that produces your Daymaster will be down here. And it'll be given the label resources. And this is how every chart I've ever seen of Joey Yap, this is how it'll be laid out. Now, he has a pentagon with a bunch of lines, and this is why I say it looks like a spider web, but each one of these represents 20%. So the outside is 100%, the second one is 80, the third one is 60, the fourth one is 40, and the one in the closest to the center is 20. 0% is right at the center where all these lines merge. And you can have 0%. It's possible. It's not super common, but it's possible for one of the elements. Sometimes even more than one. So here's an example of a chart. It actually is mine, but This is an example of an unbalanced chart, just so that you have an idea of what one will look like. So I have one element that is in the low elements, not very far into it. It's like 35. So it's actually not terribly likely to give me a ton of problems. Um, and partly because it's also my output. But uh, most jobs don't require output. Most jobs require you to do things properly. And then I have three: the companion, the wealth, and the influence are all within the average range. And that's this one right here in the green line, or the green area. And I also have one that is in the high, and that's my resources. Now, if all of yours are in this average range here, between 40 and 60%, then you have a balanced chart, and you can compete with most people. You're as good as most people. So you're versatile. This has a lot of advantages. And you also don't tend to be weak in any areas that can cause you real problems. If you do have real problems, that's usually something else going on in your life. Could be where you live, it could be your upbringing, it could be possibly feng shui, um, it could be too high of an expectation, which usually has something to do with your upbringing. But if you're balanced, everything is in here, this is when we start worrying about other things other than Batsa being your problem, if you're having problems, of course. Now, the rest of this video is going to talk about the things in the low area. Now, 15% is halfway between 20 and the zero in the middle is 10. And so 15 is right about there. It's a little hard to see, but it is not right up at 20, but it's not halfway. It's somewhere in between. That's what 15%. If you have anything that close to zero, there's a decent chance this can affect your life in a way that it can come out negatively. But it's usable. I mean, you can still do something about it. This isn't like set in stone and this is your life. It's not fate, it's potential. There is a difference. Now, the next video is going to talk about if you have really high levels. Now, this is still in the healthy high range. So the unhealthy high range is just above this, up to 100%. That's when it's potentially unhealthy. Doesn't mean it's really unhealthy. It depends on the person and, what they do with their lives. And sometimes there's enough of the others that balance it all out that it's not a real problem. Now, if you have any of the structures below 40%, note that, and which one it is. Is it companion? Is it output? That kind of thing. What label is on there? And put an extra little mark where if anything happens to be below 15%. Note that whether it's below 40 or below, if it's below 40, is it also below 15? The lower that value is of any element you have, the more likely this can be an issue that can affect certain aspects of your life. Oftentimes it does have to do with work because that is a big part of our waking life, let's put it that way. Now, these same rules of the 40 and the 15% also apply to your 10 gods, and that's what Joey Yap calls profiles. And the 10 gods are basically the 5 elements divided into yin and yang, and that's so you get 10 because you've got one of each. It does show you a more refined discussion, or not discussion, a more defined aspect of what that element means to you. And I've already talked about exactly what that is in the level 1. What does your element mean to you? It all depends on your day master. And So again, you can still have this even if you don't have anything that's below 40%. That's possible. Because the other one is much higher. And then that means you will have something that's in the high value. So you have to look at both. Now, in general, this refinement into the 10 gods is more useful in terms of helping you choose perhaps a career or perhaps what type of job. What skills does that job require you to use? That's where the 10 gods is most useful. Now, not everybody is going to have problems with low levels. So this might not apply to you, but if it applies to one of your kids or your spouse or someone you care about, you can maybe help them. Now, determination is a big thing. And unfortunately, luck is also big. This can help you guide yourself to a good career even without you knowing about it. If you run with your strengths, usually you're going in the right direction. So now we're going to look at the 10 gods. I mean, we already talked about in the first one, 2A, we talked a bit about the charts. And again, here we're going to look at your natal levels. It's always been on the left side of the two bar charts that he shows, but there's a label on top, so make sure it says natal. Again, anything above 60% is higher than average. Anything in between 40 and 60 is considered average. And anything below 40 is low. And of course, the lower it is, the weaker the scale, and it can be 0%. You can just be completely missing an element. And actually, most charts have at least one missing element. Not all, but quite a few charts do have some sort of missing element. Now, again, you can have something under 40% or even over 60% of the 10 gods, even if your structures, that spiderweb looking chart, everything is in the normal range. That is not weird, so don't be confused about that. Now, the Bazi calculator also lists these levels, but not with the same type of percentages. So don't mix these up. You can look at them and see, is the top level in Joey Yap the same as what you're going to get from the Bazi calculator? Is it the same element of the 10 gods that's the highest? But you can't compare the two any other way. Joey Yaps uses this percentage that is a little mysterious, but he does it from 0 to 100%, and that is the easiest way to understand it, which is why I use this for you guys, because this is doing a lot of work that I don't know enough about to tell you to use it any other way. But again, note very specifically, if it's below 40, is it also below 15? And again, the elemental levels, there are, like I said, at least 5 different methods out there to calculate your elemental level. And the level, how from the highest to the lowest, what order you have of your elements can change depending on whose method is being used to analyze your chart. So uh, that to me is a little, well, I shouldn't say a little disturbing, but it just shows that this is still in flux. This is, despite how many years have been put into this, it doesn't seem to work 100%, any one of these methods, or otherwise everybody would probably throw out the old ones. Of course, this could be done scientifically and find out who's closest, but that takes money, which nobody seems to want to put into this. So there are at least 5 methods that I know of. There's the Joey-Up method, which does seem to be different than quite a few others. There's Ken-Lai, which is one of the choices you have with the Bazi calculator. Then you have the modern HHS, which I believe stands for Heaven Hidden Stem. And then you also have the traditional HHS. Now, these 4 you get from the free sites. Joseph Yu is another one, an additional one, but you only get that from the Chinese Metasoft site. That's the only one I know for sure. That's where you're getting it from. So uh, again, Chinese Metasoft has maybe even a 1 week subscription, but it certainly has 1 month subscriptions. I'm pretty sure they still have that. So, of course, this is the one I usually use, and so I pay for this because I like what it does in terms of it analyzes things a bit better than these free sites. And I don't know if I can use Joey apps without incurring his wrath, so I don't use his site. Now, some people's charts, that is, what element is the highest, what element is the lowest non-zero one, can vary considerably depending on which method is being used. Uh, and others don't. Others are very stable in their order. Um, I don't know what other to say than, if you have one that changes depending on who does it, well, that may just mean that you are less likely to obey what the Bazi says because it depends on who's doing the analysis. So, but don't worry about it. You know, just use the Joey app one for the percentages. See where you roughly are. That's good enough. Uh, I don't think any of this stuff is super precise because there is, that nature versus nurture. Well, the nurture makes a big difference. And I don't see how that can be captured in Bazi unless you look at the parents also. Now, Joey Yap does present it in a very different way than these other um, four methods do, but it is a very useful way. And that's why I ask you guys to use it because it's very easy to deal with. Now, the downside is it's completely unclear how he decides what 100% is. And unless you're a math nerd like I am, uh, this probably doesn't bug you at all. And that's actually what I want. Don't worry about this um, because at least this is free and it gives you a good way to predict things. Now, the Batsa classes that I've looked into of these people who actually would tell you how it's done are between 2,000 and 6,000 US dollars. Now, my business has not paid me a penny, and I barely break even because I have overhead costs. So I don't have the money to attend a Batsa class, not at this rate anyway. Um, I wouldn't mind getting a class from Douglas Chan, who seems to be quite knowledgeable, but his is like $6,000, and that's so far beyond even what I imagine I will ever earn. I have to raise my prices quite a bit if I want to earn that much. So let's go on to actually what does a low level mean? So this is, I'm going to start with the companion, down where the daymaster is. You can never have a 0% of friend because your daymaster is your friend. So you can have a low level, but it can never be zero. Now, if you do have a low level, again, we're mostly talking below 15%, you it's not unusual to have a lot of difficulty with relationships. You don't really understand other people, you don't understand why they do what they do, you don't understand their motivations. Sometimes you don't understand your own motivations. You find people confusing, basically. You just don't understand how especially other people's minds work. So I'm going to ask this kind of thing for each one of these low levels. How could this hurt you to make a living? Well, you don't work well with others and you don't collaborate very well. It's not that you're trying to take over or anything. It's just that you just don't know how to mesh together with somebody and get things done better than each one of you could do separately. That's all it basically means. And it's just hard to it's a little hard to explain exactly why this works, but this is definitely something that can happen. You just don't know how to interact in a way that is beneficial. Like 2 plus 2 is more than, I mean, 2 plus 2 is more than 4. I mean, that is 1 plus 1 is more than 2. That somehow you get more out of a combination than you have them separately. That doesn't happen with you very often if you have something below 15%. You probably don't network very well. You probably, if you are forced to go to a networking event, you go hide yourself someplace so you don't have to talk to people because you just have such a difficult time dealing with them. So you may not be able to network at all. And depending on the situation, sometimes if it's really low, this might not be a problem. But if it's low, let's say 10%, 5%, you might actually be lonely often because you want to have some connection. If it's at 0%, you might not care. You may not, well, it can't be at 0. So, but, depending on how low it is, this may not be a big problem. But uh, even at 20%, you might feel lonely quite often. And it's because you want to have a connection, but you just don't know how to do it. Or at least don't know how to do it well. But how can this weakness help you? Well, you're going to be more objective. Um, so your friends will know that, and you still have some friends, but your friends will know if they want a real objective opinion, they will ask you. Of course, that usually means that they really want an objective opinion. They're not going to ask you, does this outfit look good on me? Because they don't want an answer that's objective. Um, you know, most of the time anyway. And also, friends can't easily use you because if they try to use you, you usually dump them. Basically, you just you know you don't tolerate people using you, which is actually a good thing. Now, if you want to increase this, and this is not easy, I know, but if you want to, you can allow yourself to be more open. Um, you want to help others when you can, and this is the big thing. You need to allow them to help you, which actually might be your biggest problem, is that you can't accept help. Uh, and because you don't understand somebody else's motivation. So you help others, you allow them to help you, you have to trust them. And that can be hard for someone with a low friend. Now, if you have low or missing, and this one can be missing, the rest of these can be missing of the Rob wealth. Now, this will be your same element of opposite polarity. So this can exhibit itself either in stinginess or greed, and you might think they're like opposite, but they both come from a feeling of not having enough. Stinginess is you're worried about money, greed is you're worried about stuff. So you tend not to get a lot of enjoyment from helping others um, because you feel like you've given something up that maybe you couldn't afford to give up. And that's why you don't get a lot of enjoyment. But basically, it's feeling like you don't have enough. You're always worried that what if this happens and I can't afford it? That kind of thing. That's what will exhibit in stinginess. Or what if somebody thinks really bad of me because I don't have this thing? This the newest cell phone or whatever. That is where greed will be exhibited. So it depends on what you feel like you don't have enough of. So how can that hurt you? Well, networking is still can be difficult because you will ask for help and people will give it to you. But when they ask you to help them, whether it's themselves or for a friend, you'll make up an excuse why you can't help. And so after a while, they they will just ignore you because they know you won't help. So they cross you off the list and they just don't contact you anymore. So long-term networking is hard. This, however, is where you really can get into trouble. If you're not willing to spend money on education or other activities that can improve your skills, this is where you really harm your future. Uh, the, you shouldn't spend more money than you need to, but this is an investment in yourself, and this is usually worth it. Um, if you are, especially if you're certain this could help you. I mean, the people who have this low level may say, "Oh yeah, I know this thing would help me, but that's too much money." Well, I mean, if it's really too much money, don't do it. But if you actually have the money available and you know it would help you, spend that money because you know it's going to help you. So this is this is where most people get tripped up actually is this thing where they're unwilling to actually help themselves by spending some money. But how can this help you? Well, you're also less likely to go bankrupt, especially if it exhibits a stinginess. And you're also more likely to have enough retirement savings, which is pretty rare, actually. And in general, you're less likely to have a problem with gambling. You may gamble once, but all you have to do is lose even $10 or $15, and you just go, well, gambling's not so great. And even if you win big the first time, as soon as you lose, you're pretty much done. You just don't care anymore. You're not into gambling. This is pretty common, which is a very good thing, actually. Now, if you want to increase, this is the easiest one. Volunteer helping others less fortunate. That makes you understand how much you do have. And so that can help you with both stinginess and greed. It can make you feel like, yes, I'm so much better off. I really need to adjust my scale of what do I need. So this one is actually pretty easy and it's very good for the community. So it's a win-win situation. Now the low level of an eating god, which is part of output, this has to do with being creative, usually in ideas or in actions. It could be doing something creative, not just thinking something creative. Now, if you're going to be low on something, in general, this one isn't terribly bad to be low in because most jobs and even most of life doesn't require you to be highly creative. You don't want to be totally missing this, but a low level isn't terribly bad. So how could this hurt you? Well, you're probably not going to want to run your own business, but if you do, or if you work in a small or medium-sized company and your boss comes to you and says, I have this problem, I want people to, I've got some ideas, but I want to hear your ideas, how to fix this problem. You're not going to be the one to come up with a good solution. That is a true creative solution. Somebody else will see it, probably, um, and and they will get probably a promotion from it. But you can get promotions by doing your job well. So this isn't like a disaster. So uh, it's okay. Um, if you are a business owner and you don't see the solution, then if you don't have any employees, well, basically all you can do is search the web because you're not going to be able to come up with a solution very well yourself. But how can this help you? Well, if you're working for a large corporation, they're very rule oriented. And if you're also detail oriented, and that means basically you have a decently higher level, at least normal, of either the DW or the DO, which I'll talk about in a bit, that means that um, you do your job thinking about the responsibility of doing your job. You don't do it in a slack manner. You try to do your job properly. And if you're in a large corporation, that's all they want. They want you to do the job, follow the rules, just get the job done efficiently. That's all they care about. And you can do your job well and get paid well. So you don't need a lot of creativity if you're in a big corporation. In fact, they don't like, in general, don't like creativity except for in a few people. So you can make a very good living without any eating God. It's possible. Now, one thing I want you to note is a low level of eating God does not mean you cannot change or even that you dislike change. Those two are totally separate from one another, whether you like change or not. What it means is you're not likely to create the change. So it's a big difference. You may hate change, you may like change. The eating God doesn't tell you that. Usually the level of water in your chart does. Now, the level in your water might be, if you were a metal daymaster, then your water is your output. And then that would be telling you something. But that's the only one. Now, if you want to increase this, basically you need to relax and just play. I mean, be like a kid again. Stop worrying about what the results are and just create. And who cares what the results are? Take up a hobby that has some creativity involved. You're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it to earn money. And that really takes off a lot of pressure. So just have fun, you know. Um, this usually can help bring out whatever level of eating God that you have into fruition. And it's a little surprising, but it can work. Now, here's the other output. This is if you have a low or missing hurting officer, which sounds terrible, but it is that's just what it's usually called. Basically, you dislike the spotlight. You could perhaps have extreme stage fright. That is, you don't even like getting up in front of your colleagues, even like 3 or 4 of them in the conference room and talk to them. This might make you very nervous. That's what I mean by extreme stage fright, not being on stage. Most people don't really want to be on stage, but well, maybe they do. I don't know. But um, we're not talking that stage fright. We're just talking about not being comfortable talking to groups of people, even people you know. So, how can this hurt you? Well, most people who have low or missing hurting officer tend not to be good salespersons. They just, how to sell something doesn't come naturally to them. They're also not very good spokesmen for themselves either. So that means they tend not to remind the boss about the work that you've done. You just assume the boss remembers, and that's a bad assumption. So you do have to do a little bit of bragging. Now, you're also less likely to feel comfortable in a leadership position, um, and especially talking to more than one-on-one or maybe one-on-two with some of your employees. You really don't like talking to them uh, as a group. So, but how could this help you? Well, most people who have low hurting officer also are more interested in helping others rather than themselves. And so that means that if you need help, there are usually a lot of people out there that are more than willing to help you because you've helped them. So, so you have a net to fall back on, and maybe not a single person can get you out of a mess you're in. But when you add up all the people and they all help you with a little bit, you can get out of a real big mess. Now, this style of networking, and it is a type of networking, comes about more naturally rather than like going to a networking party or something like this. So this tends to be stronger and more long lasting because these people feel they truly owe you um, and that you help them because you are a helpful person, basically, not because you were expecting something in return. So if you want to increase this, basically start talking to groups. Start small, work bigger. Try to lead a project at work. Don't start huge, but lead something where you have to talk to everybody, organize things, um, and you just get more and more used to talking to people. And something that most people can do. And at a certain point, it will stop being stressful. Now we'll come to wealth. This is the element your day master controls, and you could have a low or missing indirect wealth. Now, indirect wealth is usually associated with people who have usually the drive and the energy, and usually they can see a something that can be fixed. And they're the type of people that are good at running businesses. But if you have lower missing of this, you basically don't have what it takes to run your own business. Now, that doesn't stop you from being a franchise owner, because a franchise owner, most of the rules come from, the headquarters elsewhere. Running your own business is quite a bit different. Now, if you don't have a good amount of resilience, if you don't have a lot of drive, or you have low levels of independent thinking, usually you cannot run your own business. You will find it too much work and too much stress, and you'll just quit. And you'll say, no, I think I'll go back to working for somebody else. And most people don't have a high enough level to do this well. So they 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 there's a lot of responsibility in running your own business. As my father also ran his own small business, so I know how much responsibility it takes. So um, and so you have to really have what it takes. Now, how can that hurt you? Well, basically, it can really only hurt you in one particular way. You have trouble seeing the niches in the market wherever you are that need to be filled. So you miss these opportunities to fill them. And that's usually where a good small business, how it can function. It's uh, it, it, it sees something that's like missing. Like, for example, for this, I see a niche where people will say, "Oh, this is what feng shui can do you. This is what Bazi can do for you." Blah blah blah. All they're doing is selling you, whereas they're not telling you much. And of course, the reason is a lot of this stuff is pretty easy, and so once you know this, you can do it for yourself. And of course, that means they'd be out of a job. Now, of course, my goal here is not to make a ton of money because I'm not making hardly any. But I just want to break even. I'd be happy with that. Uh, and and my thing is to help people that need help but can't afford help. And so this is a niche. But then I'm not trying to make a ton of money. So I'm not really a very good business owner either, even though this is my what they call main profile is indirect wealth. So I should be able to run a business very well. Um, but I am making my goals because my goal is not to become rich. Now, how can this weakness help you? Basically, if you recognize that you don't have what it takes to run your own business, because it's not easy, you don't risk your money on it. And since a large number of these fail, you end up with more money because you didn't risk your money on a business that failed. So, uh, and and most people who even think they want to do this, a lot of them, actually, we shouldn't say they fail, although some do. Most of them shut down voluntarily because they're tired of all the work that's involved. So, but this does tend to lead you to a better work-life balance. So you work when you're at work, and when you come home, you're done. You're done with work, and then you try to, it, that at least you have a better chance if you're working for somebody else. If you're working for yourself, basically, your waking hours are working hours, um, and that's what I see. Now, if you want to increase this, Maybe you're not going to ever make your own business for a living, but start a side gig with something that you enjoy. Basically, your goal is perhaps, this is a possibility, is not to lose money on your hobby. So, maybe you can sell something, even if it's just videos. You can sell something, how you do something, so that you don't make a ton of money, but you're no longer spending money on your hobby. Maybe it would be better to save that money. So that's the kind of thing you can do, um, and and you're not looking necessarily to make this your full career, but you get some money on the side, and that's good. And that's if you have this low or a missing indirect wealth. You can still make a little bit. It's just not going to be your main thing. And the thing is this can go on even after you retire. As long as you enjoy doing that hobby, you can still continue to make money. So I think it's a pretty good way of taking advantage of any of the IW that you do have. So if you have a low or missing direct wealth, this is the other wealth one. Basically, you you really, it boils down to this. You're not comfortable with especially strict rules. You often don't see the reason why the rules are in place, and you can think of better ways of doing things, and the rules start driving you a little crazy. Now, how can that hurt you? Well, you're probably not going to be able to work at a big corporation. When you work at a big corporation, in general, not always, but in general, your income is more stable. That is, you don't get laid off on a regular basis or lose your job on a regular basis. And you're going to earn a little bit more if you're in a big corporation. So if you don't work there, your jobs are probably a little bit less stable and lower income. But you probably can't put up with all the rules that a big corporation has. You probably have a hard time even remembering them. So you basically have this attitude, rules are made to be broken. That can get you into trouble with the authorities, like, for example, the IRS, if you do things wrong. It can also get into trouble with your peers. That is, there may be some people who are more hung up on rules that maybe stop being your friend because they don't like how loose you are with the rules. Now, rules are different than laws. Uh, Although, if you're getting in trouble with the IRS, it usually is a law. But there, most people, even who have low or missing direct wealth, know there's a difference between rules and laws. Laws are things on the books that you can, get fined for or go to prison. Um, Whereas a rule is just get a slap on the wrist when you break a rule. And and if you have lower missing, you're probably willing to do that because you would like to show people that those rules are dumb. So how can this help you? Well, first off, you're more free to be who you are, and if you go with this, you tend to be happier. And if you're in the right place at the right time, you can actually change society for the better. For example, although I haven't looked at it, I would not be shocked if Martin Luther King Jr. had low or missing direct wealth, although he was a pastor, so it's a little hard to tell. But if he didn't shake up the rules about what is the proper place for African American people here in the United States, things would still be terribly unfair. They're still unfair, but they're not as unfair as they used to be. So um, this is how you can change society for the better, because you can show people, if you have enough influence, you can show people how stupid a certain rule is. Now, if you want to increase this, if you have a low level and you want to increase it, then gain some leadership skills and some organizational skills, because that allows you to see some value of at least some of the rules. So you're more willing to put up with following the rules, at least in a number of situations, and especially with business. That is your career. Now we come to the power and influence. This is the element that controls your day master. Now, if you have a low or missing 7K, you basically aren't able to stand up for yourself or your rights. So I'm pretty sure you know what the problem will be with this. You are going to be taken advantage of by coworkers. You're unwilling to defend your point of view, even when you know the other point of view is going to hurt your company or hurt you or hurt your friend. You just you just can't stand up for your point of view with the other person around. Maybe if it's your friend, you may take them on the side and explain something, but you're not going to defend it to other people. How can this help you? Well, this one was a little hard for me. Not that I have a tremendous amount of 7K, but basically you tend to have fewer arguments because you're just not willing to argue. That doesn't mean you're not stressed by how wrong you think somebody else might be. But at least you have fewer arguments and maybe you get more done because you're not arguing. That's about as good as I can come up with. There may be other reasons, and somebody else might be able to come up with these. But not standing up for your rights is usually not a good way to succeed in life. So this one is a pretty significant one. Now, how can you increase this? Well, you can take a self-defense class. I think this is very good. It gives you more confidence in yourself. You can take a debate class. This will probably be very painful, but this can really help you. But maybe first what you might want to do is go to some rallies that stand up for what you believe is right. Here you can hear other people talking. This can give you talking points, maybe help you see how they do it, and you try to emulate them. That's the best that I can come up with. Now, the other part of the influence is the direct officer. Now, this often means if you have low levels, you have poor diplomatic skills, perhaps poor leadership skills, you maybe you're a little you you don't see yourself as a leader, and so you don't think in that kind of way. So basically, how can this hurt you? Well, you could inadvertently, I mean, you don't even realize you're doing it. You're insulting your bosses or you're insulting your coworkers who complain to your boss. So you don't get promotions that you otherwise might be qualified for because your boss can't trust what you're going to say. And that is a problem often with people with low direct officers. They're too blunt. They're and they to the point where they may not even be comfortable telling people white lies. Most people will tell people white lies just to not hurt their feelings, whereas people with lower missing direct officer will, if they realize what they're thinking of is going to hurt the person, they will come up with an excuse not to tell them anything, just to not give an opinion when it comes to a white lie. Like, oh, I just don't know. Maybe that would be their catchphrase when they realize what they're really thinking won't make that other person happy. So they're really uncomfortable with lying, actually, because they're they I mean, this diplomacy does require white lies, and they're not very good with that. So how can this help you? Well, most people with low DO have really hard time lying, so they're trustworthy in their work. When they say something, you know they're not fudging the work. Now, that doesn't mean they're perfect and won't make mistakes, but when they make a mistake, they admit it. They don't try to lie their way out of it, like, oh, that was a misprint or something like this. They will say, I screwed up. And so you can trust what they say about their work. And this is actually a very good thing. But it doesn't usually mean that you'll be at the highest level in a company because you're too straightforward. So if you want to increase this, learn some leadership skills. This can be done. There are even classes, I think, or people can help you with this. Um, if you're at work and there's a project that's not huge, volunteer to head the project work. You don't want to have something that's going to make or break the company because you might not be prepared for it. But this is something you can do on a smaller project. And also, especially when people catch you unawares, pause a moment to think before you speak so that you don't blurt the first thing that you're thinking, because oftentimes that's very straightforward, very much the truth, but may not help people, may make them very unhappy. So this is how you inadvertently insult people. You're just giving your true response. You don't mean to be insulting, but other people can be insulted. So pause a moment to think before you speak. That's probably the biggest thing that you can do to help. And then maybe you don't say much, but it's better than insulting someone. So we come to the last group, the resources. So if you have low or missing indirect resources, you tend to have more of a narrow mind or more of a narrow outlook. You don't see yourself doing a lot of different things oftentimes. Um, you also often don't see the big picture. Like there's a project and you know what the end result is supposed to be, but you don't see why you're doing it. You don't see the big picture. And this can lead to difficulty dealing with change because you can't see why you're doing something differently. So can be quite disabling if you can't see the big picture. Of course, maybe you can have someone explain it to you, but most people um, don't want to do that all the time. So your boss probably doesn't. So how can this hurt you? Well, if you can't see the picture, the big picture, you may actually think you're working on an important part of the project that's actually irrelevant to the big picture, and you don't see that it's irrelevant. So uh, you you may go off on a tangent that's not useful. You also might do an inadequate job on a task that you could do very well for some big project because you can't see how it fits into the big picture. So if this is the case for you, you have to have somebody explain to you the big picture probably a couple of times before you understand what your role in it is. But once you know that, then you're usually good. So how can this help you? Well, basically, um, this can be very good. This kind of thing where you're not distracted by other stuff. If a job requires a lot of precision and or repetition, you're a person who can really handle this. You can focus and you can do the same thing again and again without your mind wandering. Uh, and that is there's a lot of jobs that need this. So it's not like you can't get a good job. You can. Most people would consider these jobs quote unquote boring, but this gives you like a feeling of stability and something you can count on. So, and you like that. I mean, if you don't have a broad outlook, this is the kind of job for you. And also, these kind of jobs tend to have really do have a better life balance because what you do at work, you do at work, and once you go home, you're basically free from that kind of work because this kind of work is usually quite focused. Now, if you want to increase this, if you have low or missing IR and you want to increase this, widen your circle of friends. If you can find a group of friends who like to debate a wide range of topics, you often see a lot of different viewpoints, and that helps you see the big picture. You might not contribute much to the discussion, but that's okay. You still are broadening your outlook. Travel as widely as you can afford to. This is also really good for broadening your outlook. And um, I mean, these are the two best things you can do. This really helps you see the world in different ways. Now, the last one is low or missing direct resources. Now, direct resources, when you have a high level of this, you tend to be very good in analytic activities. That is, like things like math and science and so forth. If you have low levels, then you probably have trouble with math. It doesn't make a lot of sense to you. Now, unless your IR is at least average, you may also have a lower ability to learn new skills because you can't look at it from the big picture view and you can't look at it from the analytic view. And so it's hard for you to figure out exactly how to fit this new information into your life, into, how you live your life. So hopefully you have at least an average range of one of these guys. So how can this hurt you to make a living? Well, it has to do again with change. If you can't learn fast, changes in procedures can cause you a lot of stress because oftentimes you don't learn terribly quickly and you can't switch gears so easily because it takes you longer to analyze how you're supposed to do the new procedure. Now this can cause you to create errors and cost your company money, which could cost you your job. So obviously this can be a big deal. And in general, you also have trouble, or you can have trouble, dealing with changes in your personal life outside of work that affect your job performance. And that's because you're still trying to figure out, analyze how this all works, because you're not a fast person with the analytics. Now, again, how can this help you? Well, it's pretty much the same thing as for a weak IR. You tend to be able to handle jobs that require precision or repetition because this gives you a feeling of stability. And so you can do the same thing over and over again without getting terribly bored because you usually means you focus really well on this. Now, it also, again, means you tend to have a better work-life balance because your work requires you to do something very precise, sometimes even things that are, high-level security things where you have to pay a lot of attention, but once you leave, that's it, it's done, and you don't bring it home. So these people do tend to have better work-life balances because they are not constantly thinking about the problem or whatever's happening at work, you know. So there is some advantages to this. There may be fewer advantages than having a higher level, but it's still okay. Now, if you want to increase this, basically you need to keep learning. And I would say, yes, you need to keep working on math. Um, things like algebra. I mean, I hear a lot of people say, oh, I never used the algebra. Well, if you understand how to use algebra, that's basically how to take a word problem and solve it. You will be using algebra a lot more. I use algebra all the time, usually several times a day, because basically what I'm doing is turning a word problem into a math problem. And so the math is easy. So, at least for me. So, anyway, this this can be very useful if you can get to the level where you can do algebra. Basically, where you can do word problems. Get a tutor if you need to. If you take a class at even a community college, which isn't terribly expensive, you can often get a tutor for free, or at least you could. Um, don't know if you can still do it, but I think it's possible. But you can also, if you can do this, that is, do a word problem, you don't have so many questions in life because you can actually solve them. So low or missing levels may or may not be a real problem in your life. It basically depends on what your job is. And what else is happening in your life? If your life is going well and you are growing, that is basically you're learning new things. It doesn't have to be math, but you're learning new things. You may not need to address any shortages that you do have because maybe they're not relevant to your life. And if that's the way it is, go with it. You're in good shape. Just be aware of where you may have weaknesses so that if you need to in the future, you can deal with it. That's when you really worry about it, when you actually have problems in your life. That is, problems being able to do your job or problems in your personal life. That can come from Vata. Um, and basically, when I talk about health issues, there is, I mean, I've already done a whole, like 2 videos about health in Chinese metaphysics, but I'm not talking about those type of issues which are supposed to do with your elements in your Vata chart. But I'm talking about stress-related health issues. That is, stress is making you have like high blood pressure or overeating or something. You know, something that it's the stress in your life that is causing you health issues. There's things like um, genetic illnesses. Those probably do respond to stress, but they're already there. And also there's you as you get older, you get health issues. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about things that are causing you problems that is related to your stress. Now, when those things happen, this is when you should look into weaknesses and see if trying to improve these weaknesses can improve your circumstances and solve a problem for you. Really what addressing weaknesses does is it brings you new energy. It brings you new ways to look at life into your life, and that can allow you to move forward. And that's really how this works, is that you see there's another way to solve a problem. So that's basically it. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave a comment or email me here. Again, I'm not a master in Vata. Uh, I'll do my best to answer the questions, but I may not be able to. Thank you again for watching.